May I have everyone's attention? Wow, that was easy. Good evening. Welcome. I'm Rhonda Haynes, and I get to serve as Executive Director of the National Association for Urban Debate Leagues. I know that's a mouthful. It's affectionately known as NODL amongst the debate world. And for the third season now, we are excited to present iResolve, which is a public debate series that we launched back in 2020. We thought of it before the world changed, and so it's pretty special to be able to deliver it in person. And so the goal here is very simple, and that is to have debaters engage in what I call real conversation about the pressing issues in their communities. So instead of just debating the topic, students here tonight will get to weigh in and share more about their ideas relating to the topic. And so this event is special because, again, as I mentioned, we've been able to bring iResolve, as we always imagined it, in person. We're very thrilled today to deliver this program in collaboration with the Washington Urban Debate League, where local students will showcase their keen insight and leverage the skills of analysis, research, critical thinking that they've honed through competitive debate. It's an evening that promises to restore your faith in the great American tradition of debate. Indeed, for the last several weeks, students have been preparing well-developed arguments that propose viable solutions for regulating social media and combating disinformation. As the November elections approach, this promises to be a timely conversation highlighting student solutions that include reforming Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act and allowing users of social media more ability to control their user experiences. After debaters' initial arguments, our guest panelists will offer commentary on these arguments, providing both perspective and feedback for students to consider before the final summation of their cases. I can personally assure you that you will be impressed. I'm biased, but objective too at the same time. As two teams weigh various sides and the surrounding impacts, such as pervasive issue disinformation in our society. Supporting this important discussion between students, esteemed experts, and interested parties are generous iResolve sponsors for 2022. I want to acknowledge with personal appreciation event sponsor Liz and Randall Sandler and series sponsor the Asia Group Foundation. Thank you for your commitment to the conversation and for making this event possible. Last and certainly not leastly, I want to offer my gratitude to the Brookings Institution. We appreciate your hosting us tonight, and we feel fortunate to gather in such an innovative space that represents your historic and influential organization. I'm now pleased to introduce David Trugro, Director of Programming and Development for the Washington Urban Debate League. And David's going to offer a few words, introduce tonight's debaters and panelists. And so we thank David and the League and the supporters of the League who are here tonight, including board members, for your incredible enthusiasm and your efforts as an iResolve partner. David? Yeah.
I'm just going to talk. I'm a little taller than Rhonda. When I was getting started in debate, we were always told to open with a quote. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, something by MLK or Gandhi to make yourself, allied with moral superiority that you were always taking out of context, something good. But as the kids remind me, I'm getting old and we don't do that anymore. So I'm just going to jump in and tell you a bit of a story instead. Between the times that I was a debate coach, which terrifyingly there are debaters who are younger than my debate career, I have worked in politics. And whether we are talking on the campaign trail or trying to put together the policies that make a difference, the communication about those ideas has shrunk from briefing books to 140-character sound bites. And the important conversations we've had have been reduced. which makes the work we do here today and that we do with the Washington Urban Debate League and the schools we work with every day so much more important. We need new young leaders who can go beyond the headline, go beyond the soundbite, and actually offer us something of substance. So no pressure, guys. This erosion of discourse has led to disinformation, polarization, and a whole host of other social ills that you don't need me to tell you all about. But we are excited to take a step back away from some of those challenges here tonight. I am excited and encouraged every time I go to work because I get to work with young people and with wonderful teachers who are making that possible and helping the next generation better understand the information that is informing them and the actions by adults that are impacting their lives. As Rhonda said, I have the privilege of running the local Urban Debate League here in Washington. When we got started 8 years ago, there was one debate program at a public school in DC, just one. Now, I just got a call from Bladensburg High School this morning, so we're up to 73. While we've been one of the babies in the Urban Debate Network, we try not to act like it. We have young people doing incredible things. Both of our debaters today were representatives at nationals in the spring this year in some capacity and brought home some hardware. So good job, guys. I also want to second Rhonda that we are incredibly excited to be here in person. I know I just met 3 people who I've been working with for several years for the first time in this room. So good to see you all. I am real. I am not just a program. It's nice to be able to have the grip and grin. You know, we are in Washington here. But the bigger picture, though, is that we are here because we're here to celebrate education and access to these opportunities as well. So I'd like to thank you all for being here and for helping us as we grow as a local league. I have a few introductions to make here, but I also do want to take a quick moment to take a note about the substance of our debate tonight. We are going to be talking about some relatively serious subjects surrounding mental health, eating disorders, suicide, etc. So if that is going to be a concern for you, be forewarned. I also have 3 more pages here, but I think you'd rather hear from the kids instead of me. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. First and foremost, our host this evening, Chris Meserole from Brookings. Joe Keller from Brookings. And Valerie Wertschaffner from Brookings. And last and entirely least, I'm kidding, our debaters, Noemi Durand, a senior at Basis. And Haven Howard, who is a junior at Phelps, who will be speaking first tonight. Good luck, folks.
Okay. That's good. Okay. Hello? Okay. Okay. First, everyone uses social media, and to acknowledge that while some people may like connecting with family and friends, the overall legacy of social media as a tool is complicated, and right now, there's a crisis going on with social media. The crisis we face about truth and reliable facts is predicated less on the ability to get people to believe the wrong thing as it is on the ability to get people to doubt the right thing. Jamis Casco, an author from the Institute for the Future. To begin, Disinformation in social media affects the users of that app more than anything. The Pew Research Center says that with more than half of American adults getting their news from digital platforms, it's imperative that information be correct. However, currently Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act makes that difficult because it says that no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as a publisher or speak of any information provided by another information content provider. In other words, social media companies like Meta and Twitter cannot currently be held responsible for disinformation, which limits their incentives to do anything about it. Today, I'm advocating that we should reform Section 230 so that social media companies will be held responsible for the content that is spread on their platforms. Currently, disinformation is able to spread partially because it's highly engaging content, so even though it's incorrect, people engage with it. By reforming Section 230, social media platforms could be held liable for that spread of information. People will still have their freedom of speech, but while the spread of misinformation is stopped. Section 230 was written a quarter of a century ago. It was first introduced in 1996, and there has been quite a lot of technological developments since then, including all of the social media companies that we are talking about today. Facebook, now known as Meta, was founded in 2004, Instagram in 2010, and Twitter in 2006. Analysis from Cappios in July shows that 59% of the entire population uses the internet. That means that there are 4.7 billion social media users. With so many people online getting their information from social media, it is crucial that Section 230 of the CEDA is reformed. The risks to the information ecosystem, one of the most important components of a functioning democratic society, are considerable. The violations will be changed to escalating fines so that the company overall is held to the same standards as other social media platforms. There are two main reasons this information spreads so quickly in the current regulatory environment. First, people lie all the time. A study published recently in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology suggests the average person tells 1 or 2 lies a day on average. That is more than unacceptable, and this is going on every day, and nothing is being done about it. According to Smart Insights recent studies, on average, people send 36 million tweets per hour. This is an incredible amount of information being shared every single day, and it's only going to increase as more and more people join the Twitter community. That is 867 million tweets sent every day around the world. Of that, 216 to 433 million could be lies. Can you imagine being told something that resonates with you on an emotional level, then realizing that it could be a lie? That goes into my second point. With fake news spreading, it would also mess with people's emotions. Everyone has their own certain interests, which in turn means that they will see more of it on social media. It is easier to get emotionally affected by something that you have a certain interest in than by something that is completely random. This plays a crucial role and is one of the most ignored ones. Emotions do really seem to matter in research in the terms of fake news, and emotions get ignored a lot in research. And I think that in this case, that could be a mistake, said Chrissy Gallett-Horner, an assistant professor at Bowling Green State University and the study's lead author. Lastly, platforms need to allow a third-party organization to have access to an incredible amount of data in order to use it for good research. Social media platforms have access to so much information about the users, including their age, locations, interests, search histories, social lives, and so much more. Some have used this information to do research of their own, but rarely share the conclusions they've drawn. And even when they do, it's fully on their own terms. Last year, professors from Stanford and New York University cited the tight hold platforms keep over their users' information and called for an independent organization to analyze social media data. Such an organization would give an unbiased and more truthful account of impacts on social media on its users. Outside review of algorithms and content moderation could also check some of the worst corporate impulses. Sunlight could be the best disinfectant. This information would be incredibly helpful in performing life-changing large-scale studies because then we could use the conclusions to inform future policies. It is important to reform Section 230 because of how far technology has come. Technology is a key part of people's everyday lives. The future generations of the United States shouldn't have to think hard about whether they should question something that is true. That is why reforming Section 230 is crucial in order to fix the problem of fake news within social media platforms. Thank you. I'm now ready for cross. I guess I'll stay in. Should I stay? Okay.
Okay, great. All right, so my first question is, how do you want to reform Section 230?
I want to reform Section 230 so that social media companies are held more responsible for the spread of misinformation while allowing for freedom of speech.
Who determines what is disinformation?
So first, news sources determines what is disinformation, and among others, and yeah.
What gives those news sources the power to tell us what is the truth?
Well, okay, so news sources will determine what is disinformation, and because of that, then we're able to then tell what is the truth. So they're not necessarily telling you what is true, what to believe, and what to question. They're telling you what you can believe versus what you shouldn't believe.
How would your plan to regulate the news spread on social media restrict free speech?
So first, it wouldn't restrict free. It would restrict free speech alone. In fact, freedom of speech is already restricted, and you can say anything you want, but there's a certain line that once you cross, it becomes a problem. Like yelling fire in a crowded theater, that would become a problem.
And lastly, realistically, how will this be implemented? Will there just be thousands of workers who have to sift through posts, or what's the other ways that it would be able to be implemented?
Okay, so there might be more content moderation, but the plan is holding social media companies responsible for disinformation, and so they would redo the way that they push information to their users.
That's my time. Great. Hi, everyone. The average amount of time spent on social media worldwide is 2 hours and 27 minutes a day, according to Statistica. That's longer than it took for the fastest runner in the Chicago Marathon this past Sunday to run 26 miles. Teens, on the other hand, are online almost 9 hours a day, not including homework time, according to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. And the Pew Research Center says 35% of all teens say they are on YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, or Facebook almost constantly. I bet some of you are on social media right now. In fact, I procrastinated on writing this speech because I couldn't stop myself from scrolling through Instagram Reels. Can you imagine all the other things we could be doing during that time? Instead of doom scrolling and getting lost in conspiracy theories, we could be playing sports, expanding a passion, working a job, or paying attention to this debate. Spending this time staring at a screen, being exposed to disinformation, and comparing our lives and bodies to the fake front that others put up on socials is unsurprisingly not healthy, especially for teens in this formative stage of our lives. We have seen the ways that social media can exploit people at their most vulnerable. And help lead them to dangerous consequences such as political radicalization, like January 6th, social estrangement, and dangerous fantasies such as school shootings or the 2014 Santa Barbara shooting, and harmful effects on teenagers and young adults. The impact of social media on its users' mental health is a critical and pervasive problem that we must address as soon as possible. Hello, my name is Noemi Durand, and I'm a senior at Basis DC. Social media has a detrimental effect on its users' mental health. Its algorithms are created by the smartest people in tech, employed by companies with the goal of keeping users on the app as long as possible. It's addictive by design, and it works. The recommended content always seems perfect, if not too perfect, for that person, time, and place, and it sucks users into a rabbit hole of often harmful content. I propose a two-part plan. The US government should require social media companies to allow users to limit their algorithm-based content and provide easy access to mental health resources. One thing that sets current-day social media apart from print and broadcast media is the ability to personalize content. Social media platforms control and analyze unprecedented amount of information, and they use that to tailor suggested content to keep users on their apps. This is the primary cause of the rabbit hole of social media, and allowing users to choose whether they see that suggested content or not is one way to give users more control over the impact social media has on them. When you open almost any social media app, the first thing you see is recommended content. But many people only want to use social media for communication with their friends, keeping up with old acquaintances, and watching cute puppy videos. You don't need recommended content for that. You have the search bar and the ability to follow the accounts that you're interested in. This should be the baseline, no algorithm-based content. Then users could go into their settings and turn on suggested material for whatever they want, recommended content, accounts, products, etc. These options would be similar in complexity to the options provided for notifications, for example. Bottom line, users need more control over what they see on their social media, and companies owe users that control. The second part of my plan is quite simple. Give users easy access to mental health resources. A recent National Institute of Health report shows that social media has been linked to depression, low self-esteem, and eating disorders, and shown to promote self-harm behavior and suicidal ideation. The suicide hotline, now simplified to an easy 3-digit number, 988, should be common knowledge. Social media platforms have a responsibility to ensure their consumers' well-being and survival, especially since their content is what threatens it in the first place. These platforms need to provide links to hotlines, counseling resources, and information relating to mental health from reputable sources. It should be relevant and actionable information, such as tips on social interaction, healthy support systems, and other coping mechanisms. There should be a forced 30-second break every half hour with options for more consistent breaks and options for what you want during your break. A prompt to breathe deeply, think about a certain question, get off the app and do your work, or watch some cute baby pandas. These are all steps to help give users more control over how much social media impacts them. The government requiring social media companies to give their users more control over the algorithm-based content they see and resources to take care of their mental health is imperative to counter social media's negative effects. These interventions allow people to more easily avoid and come out of the rabbit holes of conspiracy theories, body shaming, and disinformation, which leads to the rare violent actions we've seen recently. School shootings, suicides, and the political insurrection of January 6th are all largely results of social media in one way or another, and these measures are our best chance of preventing those horrible events. Thank you for your time, and I'm now ready for cross-examination.
Okay, my first question is, if I'm a Republican person and I only want to see things relating to that, and someone else who's a Democrat and only want to see things relating to that, wouldn't that then create a very separated country socially?
So first of all, that split is somewhat inevitable, and it's happening currently, right? And it's partially happening because of in-person social bubbles. Geographically, states and communities are divided, and so that split in political ideation is going to happen anyways, even if we were just in person. However, the algorithm amplifies this split, so giving users the option to turn off that algorithm, or that algorithm-suggested content, will actually make this split less prominent. And so that's another reason why you should enact one.
So then, will giving people the option to choose to limit and what they see give them more of a chance to keep scrolling because they know they could always turn it off?
There may be certain people that do react this way to this new possibility. I can't guarantee that there won't be. However, giving people the option to turn their suggested content off will make it, first of all, so much less likely to keep doom scrolling because they'll have the option to not have that suggested content. And most people will not respond this way and instead use that feature when they realize that they're going down the rabbit hole. And that's what the 30-second breaks that I suggested are supposed to help with.
And then how would you enforce it? Through the government or independently through each company?
Yeah, so the government would force the companies to enact these regulations, but I also believe that the companies would want to enact them themselves because there's this space where consumers want conscientious companies that care about their well-being. And so when companies, for example, Apple has shown multiple times that it cares about its users' privacy, and it sells less of its users' data to companies compared to companies like Google. And so that's why consumers prefer Apple over Google. So like this is another example where if the company were to enact things for the well-being of its consumers, it might actually get more users out of that.
And for the second part of your plan, would mental health resources actually improve mental health, or would it be something that the average person just scrolls by?
So I think that there are two ways to look at this. There are first the people who know that they want help and that they need help, and so they would see these resources and use them, and that's largely the point of them. And then there's a second group of people that doesn't necessarily know they need help or doesn't need help, but then they would still understand that they would still be exposed to these resources. And so if there does come a time where they do need help or they do want to seek out help, they'll know where to get it.
Okay, those are all my questions.
Let me start by just offering just a huge thank you for gracing the stage tonight and allowing us to take part in this with you. This is, I've been fortunate, as David mentioned, I'm with Brookings. I've been fortunate to be a part of a lot of great events here with some pretty high-powered people, but I can assure you the intellectual firepower on stage here tonight is as high as it's ever been and probably higher than it's ever been. So thank you for coming here and speaking with us tonight. And both of you had such really just kind of extraordinary comments on the nature of social media and how it's circulating information in our society. And I think one of the this is actually an area that I do a fair amount of work on myself. And we're in this very unique moment in history, and you all are kind of living at the very beginning of it, which is for all of human history to this point, humans were the ones who decided how information kind of traveled across a society and a community, and we now increasingly over the last 5 or 10 years now rely on algorithms to decide how information is flowing through society, and we're starting to discover what some of the in some ways that's good, in other ways there are some harms that have come from that. And you both did a really just fantastic job, I think, of describing what some of those harms are and why it's so important that policymakers wrestle with those issues and respond to them effectively. And so just the questions I would add as part of it, about Section 230 in particular, which that 230 actually came into being when I think I was about your age, so I hope I'm not dating myself too much. Hopefully, when you all are my age, you're not still debating Section 230, and there will have been some reforms to it. I guess my question on 230 is this issue of liability for platforms for publishing something versus actually amplifying it and distributing it. And whether you think if you want the government to insist that platforms provide more data and information about how they operate, are you more interested in how, who is publishing disinformation and who is reading disinformation, or would you also want that greater emphasis on data provision to include data on how the algorithm is actually behaving as well? That was one point that I was curious about as you were speaking. And then the other presentation or speech on mental health and the impact of recommender systems on mental health was just, I thought, equally extraordinary. And I think the question that I would have coming out of that in terms of, again, kind of what governments should be doing to improve the way that platforms make recommendations, especially to young folks when it comes to content that may be depressive. Are you primarily interested in, having platforms turn over or provide the option for people to kind of stop using recommendation systems because you think they don't want any recommended content at all? Or are you interested in, or are you kind of arguing for a world where it goes back to kind of before algorithms of recommendation and deep learning, what are called deep learning recommendation algorithms, which are now used? Before that, it was reverse chronology, kind of back when the folks were using blogs instead of Facebook or Twitter. And I'm curious if you're if you're arguing for a world where users just kind of, there's kind of no exposure to this content, or if it's that you would prefer a platform policy where platforms are required to provide people the option to just have like a reverse chronological order that they understand, or are you arguing for they can actually fiddle with some of the levers of how these algorithms work, where they're able to say, I don't want videos of cats, but I do want, basketball videos or something like that. So those are my questions, and I thank you again for just some, I'm in awe of the firepower, so thank you.
Okay, I'll go first. Thank you, though. I would say that the plan to reform Section 230, it focuses a lot on seeing or stopping the spread of disinformation. So it's focusing on a lot of who is spreading what and how it would harm or put people in harm's way. And the third-party research allows for an organization to see more background on how the algorithms are pushed and more like that. So the plan to reform Section 230 is really just a step in the right direction, and then the third-party research allows for more studies and to go further from there.
And to answer your question about the limiting algorithm-based content, so I do think that there can be some positives to algorithm-based content. For example, I started a nonprofit, and our main way to disseminate our information is through social media, because that's just an amazing way to reach teens, because we know that they're on there all the time. That's not necessarily a good thing, but I think that there can be many ways that algorithm-based content can be used for good. But we want people to have the option to turn it off. And so I mentioned in my speech that it would be similar to notification settings. So when you go in your notification settings, you can say you want them only by email or only by text, and only about when you get comments or likes or whatever. And so I imagine this as a similar setting where you can pick what you want suggested content about. So whether you want it to be content or suggested accounts or suggested products, things like that. And you can, there would be multiple different settings where you can pick how much you want, but I don't think that completely getting rid of algorithm-based content is necessarily the only option.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. This is really wonderful, and I am also in awe. So I just, a couple other questions. In terms of Section 230, I was thinking about, misinformation, disinformation. It's a challenging topic to define even what is misinformation. In one moment may change when the information environment evolves, right? So we saw this happen quite a bit with the pandemic. As science evolved, the information ecosystem evolved. And so how might your plan deal with that evolution and that sort of adaptation and transformation of the information ecosystem in real time?
Thank you. And the plan would first allow companies, the government would tell companies to, they will be held responsible for the disinformation that's spread on their platform. And by that, I mean any information that is a lie that could then put people in harm's way. And so it kind of, as I said, how many tweets and how much people are on social media. The main part is dealing with how much people are on social media and to deal with it in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. And then in terms of kind of algorithmic amplification questions, I know you had mentioned that, it is partially there's a business incentive to come off as an altruistic, caring, good Samaritan citizen in the tech space. But I'm wondering about how these kinds of breaks that you proposed, basically attempts to get people off the platform effectively, play into the broader business model that is really quite heavily, I'd say, ad revenue driven in a lot of ways. And so how those countervailing incentives might matter in terms of your proposal.
When you say the broader business model of the social media companies?
Yeah, the
Okay.
social media companies, where they rely on targeted advertisements
Right.
in the way that can sometimes be harmful, right?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I don't think that it would necessarily be only negative impacts. As I said for my answer to Haven's question in our cross-sex, I mentioned that there would be a way that these companies also benefit from it, where like they are improving the well-being of their consumers, and so like there are going to be more users that go on the app. The second thing is that not everyone will choose to turn off their algorithm-based content, right? And so, like I mentioned with the different settings, like there are many people who will choose to keep some content but not all content, and so there will still be a way to get those ads. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you both so much for sharing your thoughts with us tonight. I really appreciate it. This first question is about the argument to reform Section 230. So I was curious, I was thinking about the world in which the reform happens, about effect and longevity. So how would we know if the reforms were successful, and what sort of mechanisms should we be thinking about to make sure that if the industry transforms continually? Chris was talking about the not so far away past where these issues weren't even being thought of given the current future and the advancements in technology. What are some ways we can think about trying to create flexibility or malleability in policies to adapt to changing environments? That's the first question. The second I'll give to Noemi as well. Social media can have a really negative impact on mental health. People have thought about how exactly that happens. So I'm curious about what specifically are some of the things that you've come across that lead to negative impacts on mental health. Some people have thought about, well, does it have to do with the user's engagement? Does it affect all the users equally? And thinking about some of those variables, I think, might contribute to the ways that you try to apply changes to social media. So those are my thoughts, and I appreciate you listening.
Okay, and just to make sure I understand, you had two parts of the question, like how it affects long term, and then how like to create the like reforms that adapt, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So first, I think that reforming Section 230 now would be more crucial than ever because the Supreme Court is taking it up within the next year or so. So it's more like taking a step right now for success in the future would be better. And we would do that by giving the companies the chance to regulate misinformation being spread within their platforms. And there's already some form of it within social media platforms like fact checkers and along with that. And so it's more of like amplifying that so that there's more disinformation that's like being stopped. And for the second part, creating reforms that adapt relies on how like the parts of the plan. So the first part is to hold companies responsible, and so that they're more incentivized to intervene within disinformation that's being spreaded. And then the second part is the research, so that we can understand the science behind it, if that makes sense. So then going from there, you could create more reforms that adapt to social media platforms.
All right, and then to answer your question for me, so what in social media leads to the negative impacts on mental health? There are several things. I think from my personal experience, the first would be comparing perfect bodies and lives, right? So like on social media, people only portray the best part of themselves, and that doesn't show their entire person. But when you see that best part of everyone else and you see yourself as a complete person, that shapes your perception of yourself in a negative way. And so I think that's the first thing. The second thing is just lack of sleep. I think a lot of people are spending time on social media at like midnight when they probably should be asleep. And that, I mean, like, you can't spend 9 hours a day on social media while also going to school and doing the stuff that you do outside of school and also sleeping the same amount. Like, that number just doesn't add up. So clearly that's an issue. And then the third thing is social media is just taking up mental space and time that would otherwise be used in more beneficial ways. So spending time with friends, being social, or doing something educational like debate or like something like that. We're instead spending our time on social media, and so that's not allowing us to build the healthy coping skills and just like general like healthy life things such as friends that we would have if we didn't spend all that time on social media.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
All right, so I believe we've reached a bit of a break point in the debate. So you all have earned the right to kind of take a bit of a breather and put some thoughts together for closing remarks. And while you do that, I want to turn the debate over to my colleagues up here, as well as those of you in the audience, for some thoughts on. Sorry, all right. Okay. You know, I think one of the things that's been so great about these speeches so far and the comments so far are the kind of insights we've heard about Section 230 and about some of the online harms that we've seen related to social media. And before kind of opening it up to audience Q&A, Valerie and then Joe, I'd be curious for your thoughts on which of these harms are you most concerned by, and which ones do you think that most merit policymakers' attention?
I will try and tackle that big question. I think that one of the things that really strikes me as particularly alarming is, a lot of what we talk about with social media, with the information ecosystem, stems from really basic psychology. We love shocking things. We love violent things. This is why back in the day, cable news showed what it showed on television every night. These things are not necessarily new. I can think about even back to Spanish-American War. Going to war was for something shocking, right? The downing of the Maine, that was misinformation. So all of these things I think are not new. What is, I think, alarming to me in this space is really that what we see now is that there are so many voices and so much signal, and the signal that rises to the top is that which is the most shocking and that which grabs the most attention. And so what we find is that we're in this space where, sensible dialogue maybe gets drowned out because it's boring, because people don't, find it as gravitating as maybe something really surprising or really, animating that is possibly false, right? And so that to me is particularly challenging in this space. The falsehoods are not necessarily new, but the volume is what is, I think, the most striking to me.
I think in our conversation tonight, we heard about the volume of users that are being affected by social media. I'm not sure if we can pick one of the issues that is most important to society, but I think both of the issues speak to the magnitude of how many people are being affected. And I think that's not something we've seen before. The increasing use of the internet, the increasing use of different platforms, and algorithms are really crucial to understanding how information gets propagated, misinformation and disinformation. But I think just the magnitude and how many lives it touches. On the side of mental health, the question I asked before was talking about user engagement. The way that these different algorithms have a differential effect on each one of us. And the fact that we get negative mental health impacts, but we may be impacted differently. And the fact that masses of minds, like so many of us, could feel negatively in different ways. I think that's something unique. So we're at a moment right now, an unprecedented moment, I think, where a lot of these interventions are needed, and really glad that we're having these conversations.
Thanks both. I have plenty of questions to follow up on, but I want to make sure that the audience has a chance to ask some questions as well. So if there are any questions that you all would like that were kind of sparked by the intellectual tour de force that we just had the pleasure of experiencing, please raise your hands. Yeah. I think there's a microphone coming that can come to you as well.
Wow, that's okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. So I actually have a question for my debater, Noemi. I found it interesting that the question that they were asking Haven about longevity and kind of long-term effects, and I was kind of thinking the same with social media, because it seems like there's not really an area in the world that changes or advances more than technology. So do you think with these kind of regulations, we may actually create a long-term harm, such as like the area of social media becomes destroyed, or like other companies that are able to, find workarounds, become more popular, or have higher revenues due to kind of working their way around the issues that the bigger companies have to deal with? So is there a possibility of a larger harm being occurred from this short-term being solved, sorry.
Are you saying a larger harm of reforming
I'm
Section
saying
230?
no. I'm saying with the, if we are regulating, how did I just forget it? Algorithm-based technology, I'm saying that would those regulations, because it seems like we're solving a short-term issue, which can also help in the future, but I think I worry that would it not be possible for a larger harm to occur? Because social media, like you said, is such a positive effect on the world. Mm-hmm. So would it kind of like how Haven was talking about, this line that's drawn with free speech, would we kind of go too far to try to solve this issue?
So I think the issue is that while social media can have a positive impact on the world, right now we're seeing mainly negative impacts in terms of like school shootings, like, January 6th, like all that stuff, that was largely due to social media. And so we need to find a balance between allowing users to like give their experiences on social media and express themselves in whichever way they want, while also like not promoting violence and not promoting like, overturning the government. So I think that the reason I suggested allowing individual users to limit their algorithm-based content is because I feel like that's almost the best of both worlds, where you don't completely get rid of social media and you don't like completely force social media to, restrict free speech or restrict what people can say and how people can express themselves on there. But you can allow individuals the ability to be responsible and to figure out like to what level they can take algorithm-based content, and then like use that in whatever way that they feel the need to.
Okay, we have time for a couple more questions, but I want to make sure that Noemi and Haven have time to actually compose their final thoughts. So if you can direct them at my esteemed colleagues on my side of the stage, that would be great. Yeah.
I can just yell. I'm just curious if anyone has had a chance to look into different subsets of social media users. So what I see at kind of a broad high-level view are maybe active users versus passive users. By active users, I mean people trying to be social media influencers who are spending all their time posting and posting and posting, versus a passive user that's just scrolling through videos and they're addicted to, kind of funny videos or puppy videos or whatever it is. So I was just kind of curious if anyone has had a chance to kind of research that and think about those impacts.
I think that's a great question. As far as I have seen, I haven't seen a ton of research really distinguishing between the passive scroller and the kind of, I don't know, either influencer or troll, depending on which way you want to look at it. But I think that it is definitely, the usage would be very different. From a research perspective, it's hard to distinguish those two. but I think that it would be very interesting to certainly look at and offer different insights and different motivations. And particularly in thinking about, the way that algorithms matter in shaping that content, the passive scroller is definitely going to be, put down that rabbit hole as they potentially scroll. And some platforms, I think there's a lot of research out there that looks at different platforms. And so thinking about the YouTube rabbit hole versus maybe the Twitter rabbit hole versus the Facebook rabbit hole are definitely places that research has explored. And I think that, a lot of the harms that we've talked about can happen even in just that passive scrolling, because that is information that is being consumed, and people are forming opinions based on the things that they see. Whether that is true or false is another question, or put there by somebody trying to be an influencer and succeeding, or somebody who's just, maybe leaving troll comments on other posts. They might be trying to influence that conversation in some way. So I think that it's a really great distinction. Hasn't necessarily been explored a ton in the research, but definitely should be an area that it's explored more.
Yeah.
I just want to add quickly to my colleague's point. It's becoming a lot harder to address that question. So say if you wanted to partition off one aspect of that, for example, some research has been done on Facebook in particular, looking at engagement. And it's interesting that you use the distinction of passive versus active. In this case, which was done almost 10 years ago, they talked about the fact that passive users really had more negative feelings towards the Facebook post than the active users. And the idea was that you were sitting there watching life being lived as opposed to living it yourself. Now, with all these different platforms that you can use and the way you can engage transforms and changes, so it would be really interesting to think about the different ways you would try to parse that or ask interesting research questions that lead to policy changes, because the engagement or what the user does as they engage differs across platforms.
That's great. I think we have one more question up here.
All right, can you hear me? Okay, I can hear myself. All right, so my question, I guess was more oriented towards the first speaker and his plan, but I'm gonna ask y'all in a more passive way. So something that I was reading about was how, and it made me think, should we be using social media as a way of spreading information, right? Because when I think of social media, I kind of think of it as a source of entertainment, right? I'm looking at it to have fun, to free my mind, to just relax and stuff. So I question whether we should even be using that to spread information. And I guess the example of something that's more like spreading information would be kind of like LinkedIn, right? I kind of see that as a social media. You connect with different people, you're socializing, but it's very informative. The posts that you see, it's on things that are happening by something from NASA. That's why I follow on LinkedIn, NASA or JPL or something, and it's giving real information. So do you think there is a world where we kind of move away from trying to spread information on social media? Do you think that's possible?
I think that's a really interesting point, and maybe dates me a little potentially, but that's what Facebook was, right? Facebook was, it began as an app for college students, and then it expanded broadly. And so it was a network for people to engage with their community and to build a broader community. I guess my one thought in that case is that social media, yes, it is a place for sharing cute puppy videos, looking at photos of your friends on vacation and wishing you were there. But in certain contexts, right, it's also a lifeline. And so I think that, the context that I know best where social media is maybe the only way people can get information that isn't censored by the government is Cuba, right? And so that's how people organize protests. If we think about the Arab Spring in the Middle East, that's how people how people organized, right? That information was spread across these social platforms because the free press or because of other information environments were either co-opted or unavailable. And so while I think that there are certainly, that sort of segmentation of entertainment with news might be really, could be really valuable, I think there's also a place where social media offers that lifeline of very vital information for people who maybe don't have other ways of accessing it.
All right. Well, I think we have reached a point where we can turn it back over for the final comments. Thank you for the great questions. And now we'll kick off our first and final. I believe, is it Haven or Noemi's going to go first? I've lost track. All right, great.
Okay. As stated previously, the crisis we face about truth and reliable facts is predicated less on the ability to get people to believe the wrong thing as it is on the ability to get people to doubt the right thing. The Communications Decency Act is going to determine whether people online question the majority of what they see. I think it's important to address disinformation. While Noemi addresses the users of social media and mental health within those platforms, I think reforming Section 230 will force companies to address misinformation within platforms because of the consequences rather than improve mental health more than social media companies giving users the option to reduce what they see and those resources. In every case has some weaknesses. Saying otherwise would be a lie. So while there might be some questions about the way companies would deal with disinformation, this advocacy allows for a step forward to stopping disinformation on social media and improving mental health. Also, since the Supreme Court is taking a case in the context of Section 230 within a year, as I said before, this means that people who aren't elected, by the people, they don't know a lot about technology, and they aren't experts on social media and mental health either. They would just do whatever they feel is right about Section 230, and that could lead to the wrong move. And as a teen, I would rather have Congress make a decision where they know more about the topic than the Supreme Court. And so the time for reforming Section 230 is now. So, and since mentality plays a crucial part when answering any question about social media and disinformation, stopping the spread of misinformation will improve mental health. The second part of my advocacy addresses the emotional part that social media plays. As I said previously, Christy Gallagher-Horner said emotions get ignored a lot in research, and I think in this case that could be a mistake. A third-party organization allows for emotions to be seen. After Section 230 is passed, social media companies would then redo the way they push information towards their users, since they are then held reliable for that information. They will be held to the standard of Section 230, and the consequences will incentivize companies to do more about it, since right now they don't have anything that makes them want to do anything about it. And while there can be a question of will companies be liable for misinformation lead to more restriction on freedom of speech, the advocacy emphasizes that freedom of speech isn't being restricted more than it already is. If it put people in harm's way, then that becomes a question of whether it is still freedom of speech or is it conspiring to commit a crime. A research organization doing more to understand the way that our algorithms work on social media will help us more in the future when it comes to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And with such an organization being able to give an unbiased and more truthful account of impacts on social media on its users, outside review of algorithms and content moderation could also check some of the worst corporate impulses. And so it is important to reform Section 230 because of how far technology has come, and with social media and technology still going on, it is important to take a step forward in order to stop the spread. And in the future, it would probably still be an issue like it is now. But reforming Section 230 is crucial in order to fix the problem of disinformation and fake news within social media platforms. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. I procrastinated on writing my first speech for this debate because I just couldn't get off Instagram Reels. Almost every teen I know is addicted to their social media and probably couldn't go a single day without checking at least one of their apps, and that comes at a price. They sleep less, have lower self-esteem, and are more likely to be depressed and anxious. But this isn't a hopeless issue. It's just one that we have to address and set regulations around. It's necessary to give consumers the freedom to choose whether they want to keep algorithm-based content off, or they feel that they gain something from it and have enough self-control to consume it in a responsible way. This is a personal choice, and we have to give people the freedom to choose that, not force them one way or another. Yes, social media companies will have to make adjustments, but those won't be detrimental to the companies. In fact, they might even get more users because, one, people won't be afraid of what they might see and they'll feel more in control of their feed. And two, consumers want conscientious social media companies. For example, Apple gets props for not selling as much as their consumers' data compared to Google. Also, not everyone will choose to stay opted out of algorithm-based content. Those who want to access the positives of social media will get that chance by turning on the settings if they choose to. Again, it comes back to individual freedoms of expressing themselves how they want, but also being able to limit the content they see if they feel it has a negative impact on them. I think it's safe to say that both sides of this debate agree that there's an issue with how social media works right now, and we need changes to limit the negative impacts of social media on its users. However, I don't believe that reforming Section 230 is the best way to do this for three reasons. One, it brings up unsolvable issues in terms of what we define as truth and who decides that. The definition of disinformation is not only subjective, but it's also constantly changing. And this is a wildly philosophical topic that I won't get into, but I'm sure my coach and philosophy teacher will love to question me about it later. Essentially, it's a very controversial question that has been posed for a very, very long time and doesn't have a defined answer. So us relying on social media companies who haven't necessarily been super ethical actors in the past is maybe not the best way to answer this question. Secondly, it brings up a host of restrictions to free speech, which could put the entire right into question. What are the limitations to free speech? Maybe this is a question that needs to be asked, but reforming Section 230 is getting dangerously close to outright violating that right. And that's been a key part of that, outright violating that right that has been a key part of our democracy for centuries. Thirdly, it doesn't solve the issue of teens scrolling through TikTok and watching YouTube video after YouTube video for 9 hours each day. This content will still exist, whether it's correct information or not, and mental health issues that result from that will only continue. Instead, give consumers the freedom to make their own decisions. Give users the ability to opt into algorithm-based content if they choose. Give users resources to take care of their mental health if and when they decide to access those. This is the best way to allow users the freedom to make the best decisions for themselves, while still forcing social media companies to take some responsibility for the negative impacts that they have on these users' lives. And lastly, I'd like to extend a big thank you to the National Association of Urban Debate Leagues and the Washington Urban Debate League for putting this amazing event together, and Brookings for hosting. Thank you for your time and attention.
Well, that was just an exceptional ending to two great sets of comments and remarks. So thank you both for just some really great and clear and powerful thinking about Section 230 and about disinformation and how to respond to it. And so I think each of us now will kind of offer a few comments in response. And I guess where I would kind of start my own some of my own feedback at a high level is that I was really struck by the commentary around 230 and the need to balance, as you both wove your way to basically where the state of the conversation is now. As somebody who's kind of worked on this for a while in two contexts. One is working with, a couple of years ago, I was co-led the first kind of global multi-stakeholder body that was, or working group that was looking at recommendation systems and recommendation algorithms. The challenge that we came up against all the time, and why I wish you actually were on the working group, because I think you would have done a much better job at cutting through some of the discussions we had, is on the one hand, there seems to be some clear linkage between how these algorithms work and the online harms that come out of it, whether it's greater mental illness. I don't know if you saw in your research, but there's a great Wall Street Journal article from a few years ago about, or I guess it was like a year ago, from TikTok, where they kind of, empirically demonstrated that it pushes people towards more and more depressive content as they like it. On the one hand, we don't want to ignore the kinds of harms like that, whether it's hate speech or mental illness or disinformation, in particular in this case, that there's clear societal effects, as we've seen, unfortunately, a pretty significant scale the last few years in this country, to allowing, a fully hands-off approach, which I think Section 230 has allowed. On the other hand, the other body of work that I've kind of been involved in is what to do about digital authoritarianism, and in particular China, and kind of what China and Russia and what they've pioneered with different forms of digital surveillance, where they say, rather than taking a fully hands-off approach, they actually want to have full control over those algorithms and full access to all of the data in them. And so the debate that's kind of happened within policy circles is one of, like, how do you square those two issues? We want to be able to address some of the social kind of harms that come out of different kinds of online activity, but we want to do it without resorting to, states and policy systems that I think we would all agree kind of go against some core democratic values that we have. And the solution that I think, most, frankly, a lot of really smart kind of experts took a lot longer to come up with than you all did, was this idea of third-party kind of researcher access, and that part of the reform, any kind of reform and meaningful reform around, 230 or social media and disinformation, is going to have to involve independent researchers who are outside of company control, but also, really importantly, are not part of the government, right? Because I think it would be, pretty dangerous to have, like, there's a lot of information flowing through these platforms, as you mentioned. There's a lot of free speech issues at stake here, and so the kind of solution has been this idea of, like, research organizations, like I think Haven mentioned, that will be really important. I always feel a little bit weird kind of making that case because I'm at a research organization. It feels a little bit self-interested, but I'm fine not doing it. Valerie and Joe are much better at it anyway. I think that's kind of where a lot of the political conversation is now, and it's kind of, what data should research organizations have access to, and, who, importantly, like, which researchers, which kind of research organizations should qualify for that access. Anyway, my kind of main parting thought to both of you is just that you're completely on the right track, and that I think you're putting your finger on this really complicated dilemma of how to deal with this in a way that we still uphold our values. And so I wanted to just congratulate you and applaud you for that and the great thinking. I've walked away with a little clearer thinking about it myself, so thank you. And then the last thing I'll say is just thank you to the whole Washington Urban Debate League and National Urban Debate League for joining us tonight and allowing us to be the host for this great event. So thank you. Thanks to everyone.
I think echoing Chris's comments, I think you both really got to the heart of current policy debates, in particular, thinking about algorithmic amplification, thinking about government oversight in Section 230, and what do we classify these social media platforms as. And getting to the heart of that, I think we can get even, more, fundamental in some ways, and think about really two basic drivers of this, which are the economic incentives and just partisan divisions and polarization, and how those two ideas fit into a lot of these challenges that you are highlighting and a lot of the solutions that you're highlighting. I can think about, Section 230 and reform of the way we view tech companies or social media companies. And I think it's maybe one of the few issues that both parties seem to agree something needs to change, but one says we're doing too much while the other says we're doing too little. And so I think that there's a fundamental challenge there in thinking about the way that we address these issues at the partisan level and the way that actors, particularly political leaders, right, may benefit from certain types of amplification, right? I've been working on a paper looking at politicians in Brazil, and we find that, sharing misinformation, and we define misinformation quite broadly as both false information and information that carries some level of truth but is highly polarizing. And that has a real mobilizing effect, right? And when we're thinking about elections, and when we get down to the basics of elections, it's about turning out your people, right? And if this type of content has this mobilizing effect, it's going to rally your people around you, and that's great. You get reelected. And so thinking about those political incentives, I think, is a real challenge, especially in this space where, government oversight and government, policy changes are really necessary, but they do come at this sort of tension between various incentives. And I would say the same thing also about the algorithm side, right? The tension between being a good citizen and being a good corporate citizen and this idea that another company might come along that doesn't really care. And, think about all the social media platforms that have popped up that will let you say anything you want. There's no content moderation whatsoever. And so how those policy changes at the company level, at the tech company level, play into those economic incentives and play into this free market idea where any other company can come along and do something different that gets people more addicted or whatever the downstream version of it is. And so really these kinds of things are, I'd say, like, fundamental in some ways. Thinking about misinformation, tale as old as time. A lot of these challenges are also really like fundamentally what underpins a lot of policy conversations beyond misinformation, beyond social media. And so thank you all, really. It was super, super wonderful to hear your thoughts about these ideas. And I definitely also came out of this with a lot more thoughts, too, that I will definitely be mulling further as I drive home. So really, thank you.
I'll keep this brief just because I thought you both did an excellent job. I really appreciated your arguments. These issues are really hard. And they have a lot of different sides. As you were speaking, it made me think about the fact that we're going to need people to work on them. So I'm not sure what you plan to do with your life, but clearly some of these issues could use your help in the future. Just a small plug. One of the things we're looking at right now is how many people are at the table trying to discuss these issues. In many of these rooms, they're typically occupied by those with technical expertise. It's becoming increasingly clear that that table is going to need to expand. Thinking about who else has the expertise and experience to offer not only in life, but also in education and technical experience to contribute to some of these conversations. So whether that's psychology when it comes to mental health, or counselors, or social workers, sociologists, trying to contribute in an interdisciplinary way to how we approach some of these technical issues in society. That is what struck me as I was thinking about that. And that is becoming clear in the field more easily. So when you have these conversations about disinformation, emerging technologies and artificial intelligence, you'll see folks that have different backgrounds. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that is necessary. To come up with some of the creative ideas you did with policy is just going to require different approaches and divergent thoughts. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with us tonight, and congratulations.
I think our mobile mics wandered away, so I'm just going to project. I'm good. I'd like to thank you all for coming. A few years ago, I was actually having a debate with some of our students, having And I got interrupted during the middle of my rebuttal, which sucks, as you know, by the emergency texts from the city saying that there's an insurrection happening. And when we think about these questions, they have real tangible effects. They mobilize tens of thousands of people to do things. They convince millions that they should not be happy with their lives. And whether it's looking at the big policy questions, Section 230, different reforms, or thinking about the values questions, such as what is free speech? What is the role of government? What is the role of security? And what is the role of information? What is truth? This is what we talk about in debate. I know a number of you are involved with the league already, and if you are not, come on down. Our students are trying to figure these things out. They're having these great conversations, and we'd like you to join us this year. So let's give our students another big round of applause. I will pronounce I Resolve in person number 1 concluded, and encourage you to help finish off the buffet.